So in a recent comment, somebody asked me to put together a preset that was the Nile Rodgers kind of, that real dry, funky kind of sound that he uses on, the Chic records and other stuff. And this is my attempt to do that. It's a pretty simple preset. We start off with a certain amount of compression. I'm using the Jewel compressor. I tried some of the other compressors because I know a lot of his compression was coming from the studio compressors that were integrated with the board, because so much of the sound was direct. But I kept coming back to this as kind of the best kind of feel of getting that tone. So we've got a Jewel compressor. I'm running the compressor at 6.5. The mix is at 100%. The volume and EQ are both flat. And then we're running a dual approach here. So from what I could understand, on some of those early records, they would record the guitar through an amp, but they would also record it direct. And there's varying stories as to whether the amp version ever got used or whether it was just the direct tone. But I've seen several things that talk about like a really good way to get the sound is actually to mix the two. So what I've done here is for the amp sound, I actually ended up using this Mesa Johns Channel 1. This is the same amp that I used when I was doing the Steve Vai Ballerina tone. And it gives a really good spanky clean tone that stays clean no matter how hard you hit it. And it worked great for the Steve Vai Ballerina tone, which actually when that was recorded, that was a direct recording as well. So I thought that this amp would work well for this. And I'm running it through a 4x10 cabinet. I know live Nile Rodgers uses a Fender DeVille amp that's a 4x10 combo. And unfortunately, this is the only 4x10 in the quad Cortex, but I think it works pretty well here. I did tweak the mics a little bit. I brought them a little bit closer to center. So usually they start out by 4, I put them to 3. And I did switch this mic over here to a condenser mic. Again, I'm just trying to get that really kind of spanky tone there. And then for the direct route, what I did is I used a 3-band EQ. And I got these settings off of an article that was talking about the right EQ settings for this kind of tone. And so we've got a bass frequency of 220 that we're pulling down by 6 dB. We've got a mid frequency of 4800 that we're pushing by 4 dB. And then we've got a treble frequency at 12 that we're pushing by 6 dB. And I'm also using this, if you can see the output's rather high. Since we don't have an amp in this line, this is what I'm using to kind of push the volume of the guitar. And then we've also got a low cut going on here at 160, and then the high cut is maxed out. We're not really cutting high at all. And then I have a little bit of ambience in here. I have a slapback delay on, very slight, and a little bit of ambience reverb. So it's still pretty dry, but I wanted a little bit of a sense of an amp in a room. So in terms of stops, we've got the compressor over here. The 2 signal paths are at C and G. The direct path is C. You can turn that on and off, and then G. So you can kind of play around in here with those sound like. And then if you want to turn off the ambience, because I know this is a very dry tone, you can turn that off. So let's go through each component and talk about what it sounds like. So the direct signal sounds like this. So it has a nice kind of, again, we're getting a dry, spanky tone there. The amp has a little more bass to it. And then when you add the two together, I think it really flushes it out. And then a little bit of ambience just adds a little bit of kind of slap to it. So again, it's just giving you a little sense of being in the room with the amp. So that's what we have here for this tone. It's like I said, it's a pretty simple preset. I'll make it available on the Cortex Cloud under my account if you want to download it and play around with it. I think the most interesting thing here is just kind of mixing that direct path with the amp. I think it works really well for getting this kind of tone. Obviously, you can play around with this. You can add a wah if you have an expression pedal that might add a little bit of interest to this. But I think overall, this kind of targets in on that kind of tone pretty well. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.